3, 2, 1.
Racing World is presented by Race Control Magazine. Welcome in to Racing World. Yes, the Racing World has changed somewhat since last time we turned up on your computer or on your television, of course, with the COVID restrictions now back in New Zealand. The boys can't get back together again at Bob McMurray's palatial shack to the north of Auckland. We're all stuck in our own little bubbles now. We're being good characters, as all New Zealanders are, to try and deal with this threat of COVID. I'm Darcy Waldegrave, with the terrible Ferrari display up in the background, along with David Turner. Hey, DT, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, Darcy, and I've gone all Indy at my end, so we're all good to go. 2008, the year of Dixon, and there's more to come.
And Bob McMurray, well, Bob hasn't moved from his man cave. Bob, welcome to the program.
I'm in the studio, Das, and I'm ready for both weekends. I've got TRS on here, I've got Indy up here, I've got the whole damn thing going on.
On today's podcast, we're going to be joined by a couple of superheroes, one of them in the form of Scott Dixon, of course, ahead of the big dance at Indy, coming up in Indianapolis in a week's time. Also, quick Nick Cassidy joins the program too, talking about his change in formula. He's still going to be running in Japan, obviously, but he's going to be tearing off to E-Series as well, as we've talked about previously on the program. So we'll catch up with him a wee bit on Indianapolis as well, Mr. Turner.
Well, yeah, obviously the qualifying weekend has now been and gone, and we have the field set of 33, which we knew we were going to get the 33, but remarkably within that, Marco Andretti comes out on top, and it was only a few weeks ago we were saying, you know, does Marco Andretti deserve a place in the team? And now he's top dog at Indy. So yes, he does. And our own Scott Dixon there by, you know, a hair's breadth really on the front row. So I think that we're in for a remarkable race. If you look at the cars in race trim as opposed to qualifying trim, they're so evenly matched, 30 cars within a second of each other. So we've got more on that later in today's show, but she's going to be a great race in a week's time, that's for sure.
And of course, Bob, you were rolling around like a pig in the proverbial when it came to Formula One over the weekend as well, Formula 2 and 3, and we'll look at that later on in the piece.
Yep, not a lot to say about Formula 1, but Formula 2, pretty good. Formula 3, even better.
Okay, so we'll look at that, and also we'll touch base with what happened in the supercars. They've got 4 consecutive weekends, the supercars, 4 on the bounce, 3 races each weekend, plenty of work, plenty of action, plenty of intrigue as well in Darwin. So we'll cover all of those off for you here on the Racing World podcast. But for here and now, I think we've got a relatively quick Nick Cassidy to join us from Japan. We're joined now on the Racing World podcast by none other than quick Nick Cassidy. Nick, thanks very much for joining the podcast. Great to have you on board. I trust you're well and are reasonably comfortable considering what's going on globally right now.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on the show. All well here, all well. I mean, life's kind of semi-normal in Japan considering what's kind of going on in the world at the moment, which is obviously some pretty strange times.
So when you say semi-normal, could you just describe what your normal actually is? Because everybody's normal is very, very different. I suppose not necessarily about what Nick's doing on a day-to-day basis, but how that actually works with your racing predominantly. What is your new normal?
I guess the new normal for us here is, you know, there hasn't been a major lockdown or anything like that. Life's carrying on. In terms of Tokyo life in Japan, the biggest difference is the borders are closed, and so there's no entry. We're missing some foreign drivers for racing at the moment. The guys that are based in Europe or around the world are having to be based in Japan. So that's probably the biggest difference in terms of daily life or racing life.
I was talking to John Lester last week, and he's trying to move heaven and earth to get back there, but it's impossible at the moment, isn't it?
Yes, it's pretty difficult, that's for sure.
Yeah. Nick, on the let's go straight to your Super GT. You were out last 2 weeks ago now. You had 48 kilos of ballast on that car. How can you win a bloody race with 40 odd kilos? How can you win a race with that on?
Yeah, well, I mean,
I'm talking about the Toyota, of course, in Super
Yes.
GT.
Yes, I mean, we speak about it every year, right? And
I know, it's just staggering.
it gets for me, it's not my favorite point of the championship, that's for sure. But there's the performance ballast system that the series has. They do it based on championship points rather than by a theory BOP. So it's basically, you know, the more successful you are, the heavier you'll be for the following races. And that was the penalty of winning the first race of the year, really.
So you've got another race coming up this weekend, Suzuka. Does that ballast disappear now?
No, so it stays with your championship points.
Okay.
The round 7, round 8, it will be halved and then off completely for the final race. And so, yeah, we're round 3 this weekend, and I'm almost ready to go on holiday and come back round 7. Yeah.
Nick, one of the things that I'm personally interested in is the experience that you've had with Formula E as a driver. You know, you get used to certain sounds in the cockpit and, you know, the acceleration tone and all of that sort of thing. How different is that when you go and run a Formula E car?
Yeah, pretty different. I mean, it's a weird one for me because I kind of, in a way, can't speak about it too much yet in terms of I've only done the one day in the car. And so I'm sure when I go back for the next test, it'll still be a shock, and I'll still be kind of understanding more differences. But the biggest things, the instant torque, you know, the power delivery is very different from a normally aspirated engine, turbo engine. And the weight of the car is very heavy as well. And so, you know, there are just some really different challenges where maybe the speed at the end of the straight is not so high, but the cars are still very difficult to stop because there's a lot of weight there. There's not a lot of grip from the downforce or a tire to stop the car. And then traction is very difficult because the power comes in instantly. So yeah, driving, okay, there are a lot of differences, and from the outside, maybe not as fast, but because of those things, they end up still being very challenging, which I think is pretty cool.
Okay, cool.
Does.
Hey, Nick, can I just take you back to that ballast again, if you don't mind, and how that's actually spread about the car and what kind of difference it is when it comes to actually racing? Where do you feel it the most from your experience?
Yeah, well, it's a difficult one because every team has got to place the ballast in the same point, which is basically the passenger side of the car. Ideally, you'd want that to be open because then you can play around with weight distribution and you know, minimize the effect of having that weight. But everyone's in the same point. The place where it affects you the most on a single lap, you suffer on long corners, high speed, especially in our cars. We have a lot of downforce. The cars are only, I say only, it's still quite heavy, but 1100 kg, actually 1080. So 40 kilos is still a decent percentage of that. For example, Formula E is 800 kilograms, so there's not actually so much difference with Super GT and Formula E. But then in the race, what makes that difficult is your fuel consumption's more because you spend the same or a longer time at full throttle because you're going slower down the straight, and then your tire degradation's more. So on one lap, you kind of look at the performance delta and we say, okay, that's going to be 6 or 7 tenths, but that delta increases as the stint goes on. So that's always a little bit of an unknown, and you just got to deal with it the best you can in the end.
Nick, how's the transition going to work between you doing Super GT and Formula E? What's the plan? You know, when do you do one and when do you do the other?
Yeah, that's a hard point at the moment. So as you know, like with the borders being closed to Japan, once I leave here, my visa is cancelled. That's what we've been told from the government right now. So there won't be any re-entry for me to Japan at this moment.
And that's home you're talking about now, isn't it? Really, that's your home.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. So, yeah, it's difficult. I mean, we had assumed, talking management team and I, that rule would change potentially towards the end of the year, which is looking less and less likely, and could become more and more of a problem, really. Hopefully, we were planning to start testing end of September. We have a test September, October, November, and then the official test is for Formula E is in December at Donington. So I don't know what point I will be leaving here to move there, but there's going to have to be a decision later on in the year.
So you're just carrying on Super GT until something else happens?
Yeah, I mean, the last round of Super GT is end of November. So ideally it would be to finish the championship here and then go to Formula E, but who knows? Maybe that has to be called earlier.
It's a day-by-day situation for yourself as far as when you actually leave. It's a constantly changing, like everybody in this COVID world, but is it that quick that it could change?
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, I'm pretty relaxed. So there's a couple of reasons for that. Is I can't complain. I mean, I'm still racing. I still have a job for next year. There's a lot of other things going on in the world that put people in worse positions. So it'd be kind of wrong for me to speak up and complain about something like that. And the other thing is, you know, it's out of my control on when it does change or if it does change. So for me to sit here and worry about that, it's probably not a wise decision. So yeah, life's kind of normal, concentrating what I'm doing here, and I'll keep opening the news and seeing what's going on.
Nick, one of the things that I was interested in was the fact that I would have been in Japan just recently if the Olympics have gone
Right.
ahead.
Yes. Yep.
Has Tokyo felt the fact that there hasn't been an Olympics? I know we're going off the motorsport topic, but I'm interested to know how Tokyo coped with that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's that's been huge here, right? That's what most of the talk about town is. You know, there's a huge amount of branding all through the city. Tokyo 2020, a whole lot of the new Olympic stadiums being built, a whole lot of other facilities ready for the Olympics. So, as we all know, if that doesn't happen, it's a huge loss to Japan. So, yeah, been had a big impact for sure.
Nick, when you do get to Formula E, it's not, you've done a test, which presumably is just you, I say just, driving around and around and around, getting used to the car. But once you get into the race, there's all sorts of bloody fan boosts and use the whoosh button and don't use the whoosh button and, you know, plug it into the 3-pin plug every so often. How are you going to get used to all that? The only way of getting used to that really is in a race or race simulations, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll go. Hey, Mitch Evans.
Yeah, right.
You're right. Like this, the energy management seems. Look, my knowledge. Not gonna lie, is very limited right now, and I've got a huge amount to learn. So, but the energy management seems pretty important and pretty difficult to get used to. I know a little bit from the test, a couple of the systems the team has in place to manage the races and the things that can change during the race. But no, I've still got a lot to learn. So yeah, that learning will start very, very soon, I'm sure.
Now that you've mentioned Mitch Evans, how good is it to have another Kiwi in the pit area when you actually make it to Formula E? Even though it's a rival team, is it nice having another New Zealander around?
Yeah, well, yeah, for sure. I mean, as you guys know, like, you know, Mitch is one of my best mates. So we've grown up through TRS together, and but it's been 9 years since I've raced against him. So I think we've changed a huge amount, you know, in our racing and our driving. So I'm looking forward to being on the grid with him again. We're probably going to have fairly different expectations at the start of round one. It'll be my first weekend. I'll have a lot to learn being a rookie, and I'm sure he'll be going for the championship.
What's been the reaction like amongst your fan base who prefer internal combustion as opposed to electricity? How's that worked? How's that gone down with everybody, Nick? And I suppose the move away from purely Japanese formula as well.
And
yeah,
incidentally, Nick, before you answer that, there's 3 of them here. that prefer the whiz, the bang to the whiz.
I was going to say, it's just funny. I mean, in terms of if you're going to read negative comments or something, I need to just go on a New Zealand media site and I'll see that. No, not from the media, but from the fans and Facebook comments or something. And to be honest, I find a lot of them quite funny, and it doesn't really bother me. A few of them are a laugh, but in terms of Japan and things, the response has been quite good, and the attitude amongst Japanese fans and media is kind of like you're taking a step to challenge the world. That's their way of saying it, which in a way is kind of true, and that's kind of how I'm feeling about it too.
Well, watching Mitch race and Simon in the Jag I-Pace championship winner has converted me just a little bit. It started to convert me to Formula E, so I'll leave it up to you to complete the task. But you've got a big task coming on, man. I'll tell you.
Nick,
I can understand, that view, and it's easy for me to be similar, but honestly, it's for me, and I think Andre Lotter, I saw some comments from him. He was in a fairly similar position, because in Japan, we basically drive outside of Formula One the fastest and the most pure racing cars in the world, right? And Andre made a few comments about Formula E before he'd gone there, that he was a pure racing driver looking to drive the fastest cars, and I'm very much like that. And so I look at Formula E as a challenge from the technology point of view. The teams are manufacturers at a massively high level. I know the drivers are all at a very, very high level, but to be honest, if I can keep racing a little bit in Japan as well, or other things in the world to keep racing high downforce cars and fast cars as well, I mean, as a racing driver, I'd really like that.
Well, if you can get an electric drift car going, you'll give Bob a heart attack. So try that one on.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. We'll look forward to seeing you.
And on that, we'll let you go and get back on with whatever you're doing in the confines of your apartment in Tokyo. Thanks very much for joining us, Nick Cassidy. We'll be following you, as we have done for many years now, with keen interest as you skip Formula with gay abandon. Good on you, mate. Thanks for your time.
Awesome.
Cheers,
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
take care, Nick.
Fantastic to have some time there with Nick Cassidy. He's had a remarkable career, and I'd say probably the most underrated driver we have got in New Zealand, unless you're deep into the scene. Wonderful to have him around, and very much looking forward to his continued success wherever he may go. Coming up next on the Racing World podcast, we'll be joined by Scott Dixon. Bob will have a crack at F1. I'm sure that David can't be quiet when it comes to IndyCar, and we'll cover off what happened in the supercars over the weekend as well. This is the Racing World podcast.
Perspective Group is a leading media production company based in Auckland, New Zealand. Established in 2009 by former TVNZ producer David Turner, Perspective Group offers you a vast arrangement of media options to fit any size or budget. It covers truly global services supported by some of New Zealand's leading media talents. For more information, contact Perspective Group Limited at perspectivegroupltd@gmail.com and check out the website perspectivegroupltd.com, where you will find even more information on creating your media solutions.
You have a dream. You have all the drive in the world. You have talent to burn. Now all you need is a chance. Toyota are committed to developing and nurturing New Zealand's next generation of world-class racing drivers, because if you can dream it, we can do it.
Welcome back into the Racing World podcast, and of course, coming from our own bubbles, it means I get to jump into the IndyCar tip as well. I was feeling left out, guys. I had to go and change my T-shirt. On the subject of the Indy, David, you caught up with one of the rock stars of IndyCar, full stop, a Kiwi in the form of Scott Dixon.
Yeah, I did. Darcy got out there with the now famous tin can and piece of string and got him at a press conference straight after qualifying or after pole day, and just got to hear a few words from him about how pole day went and then the expectations towards the race. So this is what he had to say. Well, Scott, thanks for joining us on Racing World. One of the big things in qualifying, obviously, is that you were the only Ganassi car there, and then there was a whole stack of Andretti cars. Did that actually make too much of a difference to you when it came to setting up for qualifying?
I think the thing with Andretti, right, is they had four of them, with Hinch and Hunter-Reay, and then, Rossi and all those guys, were definitely, I'm sure they were relaying, or at least, seeing the car run. The problem is you never really know how similar the cars are. Definitely the 10 and the 9 are pretty similar, but then the 8 and the 10, on our side are quite different in some ways. So, it's hard to go off what you hear. Sometimes you kind of just got to stick to your own guns. So, sometimes it can be useful, whether it's, track conditions and just general track grip. If you think it's up and you can try and trim a little bit more, maybe that's what Marco and those guys did at the end. It looked like Rossi was probably the most aggressive on their side, and his run honestly didn't look very good, especially with the grade of it throughout. So maybe they didn't trim out anymore, but I think all information helps. We would have loved to have had another 2 Ganassi cars in the Fast 9, and that just wasn't the case, but they'll be strong in the race, that's for sure.
Moving on from that, the middle of row 2, it's not a bad place to start, really, is it? And I guess the game plan probably get him behind Marco early on and save some fuel as well and get in that draft.
It's not just the driver, but, strategy is going to have to be on point. The pit stops, everything is going to be extremely tight. I think we've seen how, tight the field has been. Gone are the days where, if you finish on the lead lap, you could be inside the top 10. It's probably 20 plus cars now that are on the lead lap. So, it's never one thing. It's a multiple of many that, that gets you the victory, plus you always want a little bit of luck on your side too. And that's, what we'll try for. But yeah, I think the cars felt comfortable. It's felt pretty good. We'll see how these last 2 practice sessions go with today and then Carb Day coming up. But it's been a fairly smooth month. Obviously, we would have liked to have got the pole there, but just came up a little short, and hopefully we can correct that next weekend.
One of the things that we saw both on Fast Friday and then again, during the qualifying days was the entry speeds, particularly into Turn 1, approaching 240 mile an hour as a turn-in speed, which is 370, 80 Ks an hour. Did you feel that you were wind affected at all in any of that? And was it noticeable not having the crowd in the stands to maybe buffet some of that wind?
I was expecting it to be a little bit worse. And the problem is too, is when you go slow on that outlap, that's normally the time you feel the wind a little bit more, just because the car is not as planted as much with the downforce and with the speeds and the loads in the corners. But it actually felt fine. I don't know. It seemed like some of the other cars had some issues with fall off. I think the 27, we also saw maybe the 15 and a couple of others have some pretty big lifts and some big situations. Honestly, it was one of the cruisiest runs I've had throughout. I got a little bit chaotic on the last lap and, could have maybe kept up with the tools a little bit better, I think, which maybe would have got us, that pole position. But I'm sure it was the same with Marco too. But yeah, I honestly didn't think the conditions were that bad.
Well, Scott had plenty to say there, that's for sure. And, we wish him well for the 104th running of the Indy 500. It's a massive event. That front row, very powerful, very, very close together. And if you look at the stats, because, Indy's all about stats, as you'd well know, Bob. Starting in second position, there's been a winner there 11 times. Starting from pole where Marco is, there's been a winner 12 times. So we'll call it even. And I think our guy's in with a good shot. I talked to Paul Ziggy Harkis again from Andretti Autosport, and he said to me, 2 of our cars are really good, 2 of them are okay, and 2 of them are average. So his tune's changed a little bit from last week when we talked to him, where he said it's going to be a Chevy-dominated race, because actually, it's the first time since 2003 there hasn't been a Penske in the top 9. So that's a little bit of a thing. The big thing with Dixon too, after qualifying and after the pole day yesterday, is he actually had his first spin and touch of the wall of the entire month. But within half an hour of that happening, the car was back out on track and he set the 3rd fastest time in race spec. So I actually think he's in very good shape for the race. Some of the other cars showed an improvement, but they're going to pay the price from where they qualified. So I think next Monday it's our time, it's going to be just an absolutely massive race, and it's just a dead shame there's no crowd there.
Did you get the feeling, David, when you're watching qualifying and you're watching over the weekend, that Scott Dixon and his team found an absolute sweet spot, then didn't push it any further? They looked very comfortable in what they actually managed to achieve in setting that car up. There didn't seem to be a lot of stress around not having the extra speed that they required. They looked like they'd actually set. I wouldn't say they rolled it out of a truck and it was fantastic, but as you touched on before, in a lot better position that they were. And then I wouldn't say held back, but they looked in a very comfortable space.
Yeah, I think they did. One of the things that Scott, as he said to us just before, the fact that the differences between the 9 car and the 10 car, there's not a lot in their team. The differences between the 9 car and the 8 car is quite significant. So I think as a team, they were doing different things, but he looked very comfortable. And again, as an individual, he looked comfortable, whereas Andretti's tended to do what I expected them to do, and that was run as a group of 6 or 6.5 cars, and 4 of them were very quick. So, Honda obviously dominated. The amazing thing is Rinus VeeKay, the only Chevy in the top 9, and he's a rookie. So, but when you look at the list of rookies that have actually won the Indy 500, there's names like Castro Neves and Montoya that pop up. There could be a dark horse for the race. I've entered my normal sweepstakes, so I've got good money on some people. That's all I'm going to say right now.
Also, of course, here at the Racing World podcast, we cover off what's going on when it comes to Formula One. Although I've got to say, Bob McMurray, it probably wasn't the race you'd write home about when you look at it. If you're being generous, it was entertaining enough because it's a beautiful track. But really, what did we get out of that race? What did it for you?
Let's be generous about it and say that's the 3rd one on the trot for those guys. So, everybody wants to go somewhere else. Being generous, it was processional, simple as that. Being even more generous, there was an awful lot going on in the lower numbers. I mean, the battle between Leclerc and Lando Norris, for instance, wonderful. They were going like crazy. I'm not going to say too much about it. It's a sad situation of Ferrari with Vettel. It seemed to be getting worse and worse. It seems to be the most acrimonious, slowly getting acrimonious divorce you've ever seen played out in front of the world. Processional as a race, and huge achievement by Lewis Hamilton. Clearly the best driver. I don't care. In whatever team, whatever in Formula One.
I don't think there's any doubt about that, but the lesser formula and the Formula 2 and the Formula 3, especially in Formula 3, there was some spectacular action that's rapidly becoming my favourite formula. I mean, plainly Liam Lawson's going very, very well, but it is entertaining.
It is. Just to go down the Formula 2, Marcus Armstrong had another nightmare, really, in his first race. Came back from when he was knocked off the track, came back in the second race and did very well, overtook a few people, but finished where he started in about 15th because the tyres went off. Formula 3, Liam Lawson started on the front row. Another magic pass because he was passed for the position at some point. So another magic pass, and he finally got 2nd position. He's climbed up in the championship now to 7th. No, he hasn't. He's even better than that. He's climbed up to 3rd in the championship. So even better. So wonderful. Finished the 2nd race in 7th. That's where he was. That'll do for me, Formula 2 and Formula 3 anyway.
Darcy, I guess just before we have to go, because it's a rather abbreviated racing world this weekend, your pet subject, supercar, that happened again. There was a little bit of controversy in the old pit lane there, wasn't there?
The supercars was utterly chaotic. I like the way they gave it all one title, the Triple Crown. So each race linked toward the next race. So as a total, you had an overall winner. Now, the round winner there was Jamie Whincup. You can't help thinking he was on even points with Fabian Coulthard. And he was given the winner, Whincup, merely because he finished further up the trail in the last race than Fabian did. But Fabian had ample opportunity to actually do much better during the weekend itself. And there's a couple of minor errors that he made that I'd say cost him that Triple Crown altogether, which was the same. But there was trouble in the pit lane. Shane van Gisbergen found himself in all sorts of strife with Nick Percat on a couple of different occasions. He very much enjoyed that. But it was dominated by Red Bull Holden Racing. And I think that and Penske, but the issues that they had toward the rear of the car with Shane van Gisbergen in the earlier race, that really slowed him down. I think when you look at the amount of points that he generated after having that issue, you've got to say that Red Bull Racing are really on a good thing right now, and they're looking to be challenging what's happening with Shell V-Power Racing. There was some good racing back down the track a wee bit, but I think you've got to look at those two teams as the ones moving forward as we go into another race weekend with another 3 races next weekend, then another one after that, and then another one after that. These boys are going to be very, very tired beyond that, and possibly there are going to be more errors around that with the teams and the nature of how much they're doing. But pretty interesting racing, I've got to say, right the way across that. Anyone going to disagree with me on that one?
Darcy, we were complaining before about, commenting on that old tyre mix-up. You've got to use certain tyres certain times, and it seemed to falsify the racing even more than it normally is. This weekend, it was everybody was on the same tyres for qualifying. Do you think that made it better generally than it was before?
I think it did, because it started off evenly, and I think that worked as well. I like the way there was more interest in the title overall over 3 races, so it didn't just make each individual race as a standalone difficult to judge. But in saying that, the points still came for these individual races, and I don't know if you could say that the winner of the first race, and I've completely lost his mind, it was the Penrite racing car guy, won his very first race, Darcy
Pasquale,
think, was that a nature of the tyres? I think the results lent it more to be slightly fairer than some of those odd ones that threw up from earlier on in the piece. But I'd still rather it was more regimented, if you know what I mean,
well,
as a standalone race.
Yeah, if you look at the first 5 in the first race, Anton De Pasquale, James Courtney, Scott Pye, Mark Winterbottom, and Chris Pither. You wouldn't normally see all those. Well, De Pasquale perhaps, yeah, but you wouldn't normally see that combination of people at the top of the winners list, would you, for a race?
No, you're right on that. And then they came to the 4 toward the end. But when you look at the race series as a whole, the 3 races as a whole, the Triple Crown, did we end up having? We ended up having the Red Bulls and the Penske cars at the top, and a bit of a scrap underneath that. And I think also, just going back to Formula One, I've got to mention this: the pink cars, the Racing Point cars. You've got to celebrate. There's got to be some joy in your heart, even though it was processional racing, at the way they've managed to hold themselves so far during the Formula One. I think it's fantastic, and credit to those guys. And Sainz, the way he's driving is a joy to watch. I agree.
Well, we've got a couple of more minutes, it says on my screen now, than we had before. So going back to both Stroll and Perez coming back in those cars, wonderful. I do care if they're copies. They should never be copies. But that is still going on and on and on. Once again, they were reprimanded at the end of the race, and that legal battle is going to continue for some time. As we were talking with Maurice Hamilton last week, it's a can of worms that's going down a rabbit hole. So it's going to be very, very difficult. There were lots and lots and lots of good performances in that race. Max Verstappen once again had the loneliest race going. It was just happened for him. But it was processional. It wasn't the best advert for Formula One, but it never is at Catalunya. That's where they do all their testing. That's where they go around 1 million times. That's where they do everything all the time. The only little highlight that I thought wasn't going to happen was Romain Grosjean nearly putting people off the track. But yes, he came up with that again when Kimi Raikkonen tried to overtake him, and he did one of his little jinks to the right-hand side. So good old Roman. He keeps it in there regularly every week.
Next week, Bob, we've got IndyCar, we've got more Formula One, we've got supercars. It just goes on. It's almost we're force feeding ourselves. It's foie gras. Yep. I feel like we're going to explode.
Yeah. Before I give up, though, I just want to draw people's attention to the not only World Endurance Championship, Toyota won that, and Brendan Hartley's car came second in that. The MotoGP, I don't know if anybody saw the MotoGP, either the GP and the Moto2. You should never look at races and the incidents that happen in them as being defining the race, but both those incidents defined the weekend. I'm not going to legislate them again, but the riders were complaining about the Red Bull Ring before they went there, that it was too dangerous. And wow. But they can't change that corner. So they're going to race there again this coming weekend. That's on this coming weekend. We'll see what happens. But if anybody was ever lucky, it was the guy in MotoGP, Moto2 that went over the handlebars and kept on going. And then Rossi and Viñales, I'm just staggered that they should drive in between bikes doing whatever it was. So, yeah, just if you haven't seen it, well, don't bother. Just take my word. It's scary. It's exceptionally scary. NASCAR Xfinity, unfortunately, Earl Bamber did not come very far in that. He was in the top flight most of the time, but unfortunately he had his own accident. So unless there's anything else, I'll go through next weekend. Up to you. Okay, well, next weekend then. We've got, I have to read this, it goes on. The Indy 500, of course, everybody, Indy 500 is happening next weekend. The start is 2:15 p.m., 6:15 Monday morning is the start of the race on TV in New Zealand. We've got Supercars, episode number 2 at Hidden Valley, NASCAR at Dover, the British Touring Car Championship, Dick Bennett's WSR, I've got to mention them. That's at Alton Park. Then the Super GT at Suzuka with Nick Cassidy, domestic stuff. Hoddle Road Rally Sprint, Waikato, organiser Hamilton Kart Club, Autocross, Wairarapa, Harbour Capital Car Club, 4 Mile Road Hill Climb at Otago Sports Car Club, the MCC Motorcana, Nelson, Marlborough Car Club, and the Winter Series number 2, Hampton Downs Motorsport Park by the Historic Racing Car Club. And pretty much we're out of time, I guess.
The big thing leading into next weekend, which obviously I'm incredibly focused around Indy, I do believe that this race will actually be one of the better 500s, just purely based on the fact of where people qualified. You've got a lot of guys deep in the pack. This race will be won and lost over the 9 pit stops. I think Dixon, if he's smart, he'll get him behind Marco early on and let Marco do all the work and use the fuel. And we know that Dixie's smart when it comes to that sort of thing. And I'm just hoping that next week on the show, we'll be celebrating the fact that we have a 2-time Indy 500 winner.
And on that rather uplifting note, we say goodbye from all of the crew here at Racing World, Bob McMurray, yes, there is luck in motorsport, David Turner, Le Grand Fromage of this whole situation, and myself, Darcy Waldegrave. And if you are watching on YouTube or any of the platforms for the podcast, please like or subscribe. That way it's going to turn up in your inbox every week. Thanks very much for your time. Happy motor racing, everybody. Happy motor racing.
Race Control Magazine is your IndyCar fan mag and so much more. Publishing monthly online on issuu.com, you'll find Race Control Magazine there for you to download and enjoy everything IndyCar and so much more. Behind the scenes features, race reports and the entire Road to Indy series are just part of what you'll find along with stunning images captured from the series' leading photographers. Grab your copy today at issw.com to complete your motorsport read.
You have a dream. You have all the drive in the world. You have talent to burn. Now all you need is a chance. Toyota are committed to developing and nurturing New Zealand's next generation of world-class racing drivers, because if you can dream it, we can do it.
Racing World is presented by Race Control Magazine.